Well, welcome to Andalusia. I'm Deanna. I'm going to be your tour guide. So Mary Flannery O'Connor was born in 1925 in Savannah, Georgia, to Regina and Edward O'Connor. They lived in Savannah for about 12 years before Edward's business moved him up to Atlanta. Regina and Flannery did not enjoy the city. It was too crowded for them, so they moved halfway back down to Milledgeville. Regina's family, the Kleins, do have a home here, and that is where they stayed on Green Street behind the old governor's mansion. So Regina and Flannery would stay here while Edward would travel between Atlanta and Milledgeville on the weekends. In 1940, Edward would be diagnosed with lupus, and he would pass away in 1941. Back then, lupus was a very unknown disease, and it was oftentimes fatal. This was very difficult for Flannery and Regina, but Flannery would finish her education here in Milledgeville. She'd graduate from the Peabody High School and go on to the Georgia State College for Women, which is now Georgia College. She'd graduate with degrees in sociology and English. She would continue her studies at the Iowa State University, attending their graduate writing program. After this, she'd go on to New York to accept an invitation to the Yaddo Foundation. This was sort of a colony for artists and writers to come together and collaborate, and there she would meet her lifelong best friends, the Fitzgeralds. She would live with the Fitzgeralds in Connecticut for about 2 years, visiting down south to see her family on holidays. One such holiday was 1950, Christmas. She'd come to the Atlanta train station, and her Uncle Lewis would find her deathly ill after the train ride. He'd rush her off to Emory Hospital, where she would be diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. She would recover in her health mostly, but she would later be diagnosed with lupus. Following this diagnosis, she and Regina would move here to Andalusia, where they would stay for the next 13 years. Andalusia was a family property at the time, so it was pretty easy for them to settle in. A little bit about the property itself. Andalusia was settled in 1814. It was a part of the Wilkinson Land Grant, the government's attempt to move in settlers to the area. Joseph Stovall would build the first structure on the property, Hill House. It is still here at the farm, and you are welcome to visit it for public tours. He would also settle a 1,700-acre cotton plantation, which would be continued by the next owner, Nathaniel Hawkins. Nathaniel Hawkins would build the original part of the house in 1850. The property would survive the Civil War and Sherman's March to the Sea, and fast forward to 1931, Regina's older brother, Dr. Bernard Klein, would purchase the property for the family as sort of a retreat and a place to hunt. And 2 years later, he would establish a dairy operation on the farm. He would clear the pastures and bring in cattle so that the family could have that business revenue. When Regina and Flannery moved here in 1951, Regina had taken classes to run the business when they moved here. So Flannery was able to focus on her writing while Regina ran the farm. Flannery would write 2 novels and 31 short stories while here at Andalusia. She would draw on inspiration from the property and surrounding landscape, and this would serve as a place that would be a growth to her writing. Sadly, Flannery would pass away in 1964 due to her lupus. The family is buried in Memory Hill Cemetery in downtown Milledgeville. So we just left the gift shop, which was Regina's bedroom when Flannery and Regina were here, and now we are in Regina's office. The first thing I point out about this room is the amount of doors that you'll see when you come in. We have Regina's bedroom over here to the right. We have the bathroom that Regina and Flannery would have used. This would have been the mud room or the back door to the house. We have the access to the kitchen, and then we have the front door right in front of Regina's desk. By placing herself here, Regina centered herself in the center of the house. She was very aware of what was going on and who was here. This was a big reflection of her personality. She was a very practical woman. She ran the farm by herself, which was difficult for a female at the time, but she did it in the way that only Regina could. Her personality, of course, would kind of clash with Flannery's, but Regina and Flannery would live together for 13 years, and as such, they would have a very strong mother-daughter bond. Regina would take care of Flannery every single day, and she was very protective of her daughter, especially after Edward's death. So we just left Regina's office and we are now in the kitchen. 90% of the house is original, including the furniture, but we have worked very hard to keep this room just about 100% original, from the Saran and Reynolds wrap that you see in our cabinets to the spices and dishes that we also have. The kitchen is where Regina and Flannery would have had their daily meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, not much fanfare. Flannery would have left all the cooking up to Regina and Mrs. Hill. The Hills did live on the property, and Mrs. Louise Hill did work around the house with Regina. So the fridge that you see in this room is probably one of the newer appliances that we have. It is a 1950s fridge that Flannery bought for Regina. She bought this fridge with the funds that she made off of selling the movie rights to the short story, The Life You Save May Be Your Own. This story, if you've read Flannery's works, is a strong reflection of her Southern Gothic writing, as it has a slightly unhappy ending. The CBS short film special had a happy ending. So it did bring Flannery a lot of local fame and kind of got her name out there a little bit more, but Flannery did not enjoy the film, as it was not her story. She did get a fridge out of the deal, and she does say in one of her letters that it is the kind of thing that spits out ice cubes at you, the tray shoots out, hits you in the stomach, and you hit a pedal on the floor and the whole thing moves from the wall and knocks you over. So she thought it was a very bizarre thing, but I do like to say that that's how she brought things to life, even fridges, with her writing. This portion of the house is probably the newest portion of the house. It was built in 1958 for Uncle Lewis, Regina's other brother. He was a co-owner of the property, and as such, he wanted a place to come and stay when he visited the farm. So we had this extension built. We have his bedroom off to the side. Usually it is our temporary exhibit, but we do not have one at the time, so it is closed. But this main room was turned into sort of a sitting room for Flannery, as her bedroom took up the official parlor. So she would use this room to do Bible studies and book readings with people that she knew. We do have a photograph of Flannery in this room, standing next to these beautiful bookcases. These bookcases are probably my favorite part of the entire house. These are 1870 Eastlake bookcases. Eastlake was a Victorian furnishing company that is widely popular across Middle Georgia. These were property of Cousin Katie, a relative in Savannah that loved to dote on Flannery. So when she passed away, Flannery booked it down to her estate sale to pick up these bookcases. However, they had been sold to somebody already, but Flannery really wanted these bookcases, so she tracked down the man they were sold to, bought them off of him, and pulled them up to Milledgeville. So we're very lucky to have them on permanent loan from our Georgia College collections. This room is the formal dining room. It was the informal parlor at one point before the extension was added to the house. This portion of the house is the original 1850s structure. You'll notice that the ceilings get a lot higher and the floors get darker and older. This is how the farmhouses were built back in the 1800s. The rest of the house that we just went through was a part of an extension built by Dr. Bernard Klein in the 30s when he bought it. We have worked very hard to keep this room as original as possible. We do have a photo on the piano of the room way back when, just to show exactly how careful we have been on placing all of our items out for you to see. This buffet was not a Klein piece of furniture, meaning that it was here when Dr. Bernard Klein bought the property, so we do not know its origins. We do know that it is also an Eastlake piece, similarly to the bookshelves in Uncle Lewis's edition. The most we know about this piece is that one of the cousins says it is the oldest and ugliest piece of furniture she's ever seen, but I have had visitors that have visited other museums in Middle Georgia comment that they have seen similar carvings of animals on furniture that would be in dining rooms. So we can only assume that it had been some sort of fad to have such carvings in the home. This is the official entryway of the house. You'll notice that as you walk through the front door, you see Regina O'Connor. As well as caretaker of Flannery O'Connor, she was also gatekeeper. Regina was very particular of who came in the house and got to see her daughter. Only close relatives and friends got to come in and sit with Flannery. Many people were held out on the porch outside for book readings. Of course, this was a business, so businessmen and buyers and sellers would come through to see Regina, but visitors were very rare. We do have 2 guest rooms and a bathroom upstairs. However, it is our office and storage currently, so it is closed to the public, but not many people would have stayed the night anyway. We do have our original 10-inch farm stairs. These would have been impossible for Flannery to navigate as her lupus manifested in her joints, so mainly her hips and her jaw. This is another reason why Flannery and Regina chose Andalusia instead of the Klein house. Here, they were able to convert the parlor into Flannery's bedroom, so she didn't have to navigate the stairs, whereas at the Klein house, her bedroom would have been upstairs. So this is also where we have our temporary exhibit. We have Growing Up Mary Flannery. It's a collection of photos of Flannery before she moved here to Andalusia. So we have from childhood in Savannah to her times in college in Milledgeville. These were all images donated by Louise Florencourt in 2019. This is the original front porch of the house. We do leave our screen door open during our visiting hours, as the porch is original, but the rocking chairs are not. We welcome our visitors to sit, read a book, and enjoy our view. The view that we have today is not the view that Flannery and Regina would have had, as beautiful as it is. Many of the trees out here are only about 30 years old, and all of this would have been pastures. Some sources even say you could have seen the house from the highway. I do like to draw people's attention down to the pond. This is a man-made pond, so it was commissioned by Regina. She wanted a place for her cows to cool down in the Georgia heat, but she didn't want it to be too deep, so she commissioned a shallow pond originally. However, the city or county regulations said that it was too shallow. It would have been considered standing water, and it would have been a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So she did deepen it, but she was worried about her cows getting hurt. Cows can swim, so there is no record of cow drownings on the property. However, the dairy operation would switch to a beef operation in its last few years. So the farm would change its tune a little bit, but no cows would drown. The last room that we go through is Flannery's bedroom. Her bedroom was once the parlor, the front parlor of the house, but for access reasons, she did convert it as it is. Regina and Flannery would live here for 13 years. As such, they would create a pretty regimented schedule that they stuck to daily. They would get up early and go to morning mass at the Sacred Heart Church downtown. You can still visit the church to see where they would have worshiped. After the service, they would come back here. Flannery would sit down at her desk and she would write for 3 hours a day. This was a self-discipline that she learned at the Yaddo Foundation, and she kept it up during her time here. Her room is situated very deliberately. She turns her desk away from the windows to avoid distraction. She pushes her wardrobe up against it for a similar reason. But at the same time, Regina's bedroom was connected to this room. And so this wardrobe gave Flannery a chance to hear Regina before she had to see her mother and was able to get her last few thoughts down before being interrupted. Again, Flannery would live here for 13 years with her lupus. Lupus is a sort of disease that comes in the form of flare-ups, so some days she would be better than other days. As such, she had to be prepared for said bad days and kept her furniture pretty close together just in case. The best the doctors could do at the time was treat each ailment as it came. So that meant bare aspirin, cortisone, and steroid shots, as well as bed rest. She would remain social. She would love to see her friends in the tea room downtown for lunch. She even went to Europe at one point with her mother. And so she really didn't let lupus kind of keep her housebound. However, she would visit the doctors in 1964, and they would find a tumor on her kidney. This tumor would be benign, meaning that they could leave it or she could take it out. However, it did cause pretty heavy anemia, which left her sick and tired all the time. She said, "This isn't gonna work. I need you to take it out. I need to focus on my writing." They went ahead with the surgery. However, it would come with complications. Her lupus would flare up as a result pretty violently. She would slip into a coma and pass away from kidney failure in the next few months. Again, this was very hard for Regina, who had already lost her husband to the same disease. So she would not stay at Andalusia any longer. She would go back downtown to the Klein house. She would leave the farm up to the farm hands that worked here, keeping the business running for a short amount of time in its end. As well as the farm, Regina would leave behind Flannery's legacy of birds. Flannery loved her birds. It started when she was 6 years old and still living in Savannah, when she taught a chicken to walk backwards. From there, it's history. She collected ducks, geese, swans, pheasants, more chickens, and eventually peafowl. These peafowl were her most numerous birds. She attempted to do a census at one point, and she stopped at 40. She said there's no point in counting any further. So you can only imagine how many other birds there were on the property. We do have a photo of Flannery on the front steps, hand feeding some of her birds. She really took care of them and really enjoyed their presence. You can see in the photo that she is quite aged. She passed away at 39, but in the end of her life, she looked much older. Of course, without her there to take care of the birds, they would be gifted away, but nature would also take its course. We do have 2 peafowl outside in our pen. We have Astor and Mrs. Shortley. They are there for the visitors' viewing pleasure. And we do like to keep them as sort of a commemorative aspect of our farm.